hear ye, hear ye. This show is now in session, and Donald J. Trump, billionaire, is hearing objections from all quarters. The presumptive Republican nominee is dealing with more reactions, pretty much all negative, to his comments about the Mexican heritage of U.S. federal judge Gonzalo Curiel, who's overseeing that class action lawsuit against Trump University in California. We're going to go through who has said what lately on this, but first, some breaking news here from our colleagues at Bloomberg Politics, Kevin Sorelli, Mike Bender, and Jennifer Jacobs, the first to report on a red-hot conference call that Trump held today with some of his top surrogates, during which the Republican presumptive nominee had some pretty harsh words about his own campaign's media strategy in dealing with this incoming criticism. Joining us now to talk more about that conference call and the dynamics within Trump world is our colleague from Washington, Jennifer Jacobs. So, Jennifer, this was a call that Trump got on himself. Tell us what the nature of the call, and then tell us some of the things Trump said on it.
Well, he convened kind of an emergency call to talk to his surrogates, those people who go out there and speak for them, and he wanted to instruct them on some talking points on what he thinks they should be saying. And in this entire phone call, according to the people who told us about it, there was no discussion of backing away from this or apologizing. It was all about counterpunching and figuring out how to attack. So it was Trump saying, listen, I need you guys to speak for me. Let's go hard at this. We've got a strong case here. I think we can use this situation to take it to the next level, he was saying. He said he thinks that this can even help him in the polls.
So, Jennifer, just to clarify, the kind of people's on the call were what kind of people?
It was everyone from top-level people like Scott Brown, the former senator from Massachusetts, Pam Bondi from Florida. It was Jan Brewer from Arizona, as well as people like, there was a former apprentice contestant who was on the call, and his pastor, Mark Burns, various people like that.
Right. So unusual for the candidate himself to be briefing surrogates on message, but leaving that aside a moment, tell us some specific things. And again, people who want to read the story in full can go to BloombergPolitics.com right now. But tell us some of the specific things Trump said in terms of how he instructed them to fight back.
Well, Jan Brewer at one point interrupted and said, listen, your campaign just sent us a memo last night instructing us not to talk about Trump University. Anything that's connected to Trump organization, this memo said, you guys are not authorized to talk about. And Trump fought back and said, wait a second, who sent this memo? I'm going to tear that up and throw that in the wastebasket. You guys are fully authorized to talk about this, and in fact, fight back hard. So he was telling these surrogates, we will overcome. He said, I've always won, and I will continue to win. That's the way it's going to be. He said, you guys are the reason why I'm having these calls, and sometimes you guys get information that's not very smart. He said, you guys are getting sometimes stupid information from people that are not very smart. So he promised to have more of these calls with his surrogates in the future. He was clearly irritated with reporters. That's not necessarily surprising, but he said the people asking these questions, those are the racists. He said, I would go at them. So he was just doubling down, tripling down, saying really go hard on this.
To be clear, Jennifer, about a couple things. The first is the last point that you raised, right, which is that not only is Trump saying that we should not avoid talking about this, but we should amp up the rhetoric and try to do some kind of jujitsu move whereby he's telling his surrogates to claim that reporters and others who are criticizing him for this are in fact the racists in this story, correct?
Correct. And he also said, I've got a hostile judge. So he was criticizing the judge again, questioning the judge's credibility. One of the surrogates said, you know what, we should go after the lawyers on this case. And they brought up examples. Right. So it was talking points on how to really go harder after people.
So another thing that, again, some of you just went, you mentioned in one of the quotes that you mentioned, but I just want to amplify it a little bit. When he says this thing about, he says this is a stupid memo that was sent to them telling them not to talk about it. And then he says people that aren't so smart. He's referring to the people that work for him when he says people that aren't so smart, right? He's attacking his own staff with his surrogates, right?
Right. He was saying, I need my surrogates out there defending me and talking for me. So disregard this memo that was sent to you guys just yesterday. Yeah, sometimes you guys hear some information from people that are not so smart. Yes, he was talking about his own aides who instructed these surrogates that they are not authorized to talk about Trump University in the lawsuit.
So just put that in the context of your other reporting on the state of the Trump campaign right now. Trump attacking his own staff for being stupid. There are a lot of questions about whether this campaign is geared up to really be a general election campaign. Well, how does that mesh with your other reporting on where they are in professionalizing the Trump operation?
Well, we know that they are trying hard to professionalize it. And this phone call was, one case of Trump trying to get everyone on the same page, of trying to get everyone, coordinated on a message, of instructing people on what exactly he wants said. And people have talked about he doesn't really have a rapid response team. He doesn't have people going out there and defending him, but he's essentially a one-man person rapid response team. And he was trying to, on his own, usually the nominee isn't on these phone calls, or the candidate aren't necessarily on the phone calls with the surrogates instructing them what to say, but he was on this one and he said, I want to do these again in the future to make sure everyone knows exactly what you're supposed to be out there saying for me. He said, listen, and his quote was, I don't have a voice without you. So he was saying he really needs them out there helping him on this.
So Jennifer, just to clarify some things before we let you go. First of all, how did our sources on the story characterize the tone of the call?
The sources said that it was a little bit chaotic. People were interrupting each other. It was a conference call. Mr. Trump was very irritated to hear about this memo telling people that they shouldn't be talking about this. So from their description, it sounds like it was a little bit chaotic. He was a little bit irritated. He was trying to, act as moderator on this call and trying to get everyone going on the same page. So it sounded like it was a very interesting phone call.
And Jennifer, beyond what's published in the story on BloombergPolitics.com right now, there's some additional quotes you have that I'd love for you to read to folks from the call from Trump.
Yeah, sure. There was a lot of discussion about the judge. He was saying he's just not a good judge. He's very fast to act if it's against me. He was accusing the judge of making some errors and unsealing some documents, and said he made some very bad errors. He talked about there's a website that's dedicated to defending Trump on this Trump University lawsuit, 98%approval.com. He was urging his surrogates to fight back against interviewers who ask them about this lawsuit, and to ask their media interviewer if they've actually read these 19,000 pages of comments, positive feedback about Trump University. And one surrogate said, listen, grill those reporters, and if they haven't read the comments on this website, ask them why. He just was saying, we have a much better case on. We have a good case on this stuff. He said, I think we have a much better case on everything. And he talked a little bit about going after Hillary Clinton. He said that's the next thing we need to do, is really step it up and attack Hillary Clinton on the Clinton Foundation topic.
All right. Jennifer Jacobs, great story with Kevin Cirilli and Mike Bender. Again, it's on the website now. Jennifer, thank you. John and I are going to talk more about this call, as well as the vast right and left wing denunciations of Donald Trump over those controversial comments he's made about Judge Curiel. We'll pick up with the same topic right after these words from our sponsors.
Welcome back. Even before Bloomberg Politics' blockbuster scoop on Donald Trump's conference call today, the presumptive Republican nominee had been besieged with criticism for his race-freighted comments about federal judge Gonzalo Curiel. After a weekend of unease and outright reproach from senior Republicans such as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, Trump saw a fresh wave of criticism from his side of the aisle today. John Kasich, Marco Rubio, and Senators Susan Collins and Kelly Ayotte all spoke out against him in the past 24 hours. But we want to highlight the reaction of one Republican in particular, someone who knows a thing or two about controversial rhetoric, and that would be Newt Gingrich. Here is what the former Speaker of the House said about Trump on Fox News Sunday.
This is one of the worst mistakes Trump has made. And I think it's inexcusable. Trump has got to, I think, move to a new level. This is no longer the primaries. He's no longer an interesting contender. He is now the potential leader of the United States, and he's got to move his game up to the level of being a potential leader.
This morning on Fox and Friends, Trump reacted to what Gingrich, who, of course, some people had said could be one of Trump's potential running mates. And again, Trump showed no signs of backing down.
As far as Newt is concerned, I saw Newt. I was surprised at Newt. I thought it was inappropriate what he said.
Does anything like that get through to you and make you reform your tactics when someone who's been a supporter of yours comes out and says this is a huge mistake?
All I'm trying to do is figure out why I'm being treated so unfairly by a judge. And a lot of people agree with it. All I want to do is find out, why am I being treated so unfairly?
We reached out this morning to all 26 members of Congress who have endorsed Trump to come on this show and defend their party's presumptive nominee on this issue. They either did not respond or said they were not available. So, Mark, this is a big topic and a big question. Donald Trump, his comments on this, his defense of this, his conference call today, how much damage is he doing to his own cause?
A ton, as well as to the Republican Party, from his donors to his congressional supporters to the congressional leadership to conservatives who were on the fence about him. His remarks have been correctly attacked by everyone. They don't like the politics. They don't like what he said. They feel they're putting them all in a very bad position. You've got editorial boards from local papers writing stories, wanting to know where their local officials stand. This is, as Newt Gingrich said, about the worst thing he's done politically, substantively, and based on what he said on this call today, based on what he said on Fox this morning, doesn't seem like he's going to do what I thought this morning he would do, which is try to unring the bell at least a little and apologize, although the damage has been done to a large extent.
He lit a fire in a house. He stoked the fire in the house. Then he poured gasoline all over himself and has walked into the house. And now is standing on top of the house trying to get a hold of some more gasoline somewhere to make the fire bigger. I was at an event this weekend in Nashville, Tennessee, with a huge bunch of lawyers, Republicans and Democrats alike, lawyers one and all, not political groups, some on Democrats, some Republicans, all horrified, outraged, normal people, professionals, mostly in the South, horrified by this display, not just in the notion of its racist and racially charged context of it, but just in its attack on the independent judiciary. If you are losing your own party leadership, people who reluctantly in many cases came to endorse you, who are now feeling forced to criticize you in the strongest terms possible, and people like that, the people I was talking to this weekend, all mortified. This is a big, I mean, you can't overstate how big a huge mistake this is, and he's just making it worse. Just today, he intends to keep doing it.
The Democrats are taking full advantage of it. In this case, as is their right. The reality of what he said is so outrageous for so many people's sensibilities that, unlike when, for instance, he came out for a temporary ban on Muslim immigration, a lot of Republicans supported that. Right. This hasn't been polled yet, but I don't suspect this is going to have very much support. And one reason of many that people in the Republican Party are outraged is they say this is about business. This is about Donald Trump protecting a private lawsuit. You are now the de facto presumptive nominee of the party. Right. You are using the platform of being our party's nominee to try to win a legal case that has got nothing to do with the country, but only your personal business and your own reputation.
All of the work that we noted that Trump had done from the time that he became the de facto nominee to prior to last week in terms of trying to unify the party. He had done, we said over and over again correctly, that surprisingly so much of the resistance to him had at least superficially faded away. All of that work, it seems to me, has been undone by this. It's exposed the extent to which people were just superficially for him. It's made people who were more than superficially for him doubt their endorsements of him. And they're looking at the guy and saying, does this guy actually want to be president? I mean, these are the kinds of commentary you're now starting to see. Does he really want to be president? Is he trying to blow this thing up? Will he actually get nominated in Cleveland? I think all of those things are probably overstated, but that is the nature of the discussion right now. And when you have that kind of discussion going on, it is bad for you.
And I would add to that, there are people who are saying maybe we can unendorse him. Maybe just
yes.
a lukewarm endorsement.
Right.
I can take it back. Now, David French of National Review said over the weekend he wasn't going to launch an independent bid. Right. It does not look like there'll be anybody, with the exception of Gary Johnson, on ballots that conservatives could maybe vote for. But this is something that Trump did unbidden. He keeps doing it. And the reproach that he's getting will continue and should continue, right, because it's an affront to what people think about an independent judiciary, what they think about what a person should say about an American. It's a big problem for him. And the conference call, the tone on the conference call and the attitude in the conference call is not of a guy who's looking for a way to solve the problem by finesse, right, or apology or explanation. And people like Paul Ryan, who said, I may criticize him for some time to time. Their hope was, let's be honest, their hope was that once he became the presumptive nominee, he'd start going to the center and be better. This is amongst the worst things he said as an affront to people across the country.
Look, and again, that last point bears repeating, because it is the case that all of them hoped not that Trump would suddenly become like a boring presidential candidate. They knew they were dealing with Donald Trump, but they thought that some of the rough edges would be sanded down. Instead, these rough edges are getting rougher at this point. You know, look, it's to say that someone, by dint of their ancestry of any kind, is somehow incapable of doing their job
and be more loyal to some other country
is a fundamental affront to the most basic American values. And for Trump to get on a conference call today and say that people who point that out are the real racists. Nuts.
And when he added religion with John Dickerson.
With the Muslim, we're saying the Muslims, yes.
I mean, it is nuts. We don't know. Let's wait till the polls come out. We don't know how much damage it will do. I guarantee you it is doing damage to its relationships at the upper levels of the Republican Party in a way that he may not recover from.
Totally nuts.
All right. Donald Trump wasn't only asked about Judge Curel on the Sunday shows. In that interview with John Dickerson on Face the Nation, Trump was presented with statements he made 5 years ago supporting the use of American military force to oust Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, despite Trump's frequent claims now that he's always been against that kind of intervention. Here's a sense over the years of what Trump has said about this topic.
He said I was in favor of Libya. I never discussed that subject.
Gaddafi in Libya is killing thousands of people.
When you say I supported Libya?
Yeah, you supported intervention in Libya.
I did? Where do you see that?
We should go in. We should stop this guy, which would be very easy and very quick. We could do it surgically.
You were for intervention. Just to clear that up.
I was for doing something, but I wasn't for what you have right now.
We would have been better off if the politicians took a day off instead of going into war.
We should do, on a humanitarian basis, immediately go into Libya, knock this guy out very quickly, very surgically, very effectively.
You said you weren't for intervention, but you were for intervention in Libya.
I didn't mind surgical, and I said surgical. You do a surgical shot and you take him out. But I wasn't for what happened. I could have seen surgical where you take out Gaddafi and his group. I was in favor of Libya. We would be so much better off if Gaddafi were in charge right now.
So, John, that 2011 footage of Trump supporting intervention in Libya was reported back in February, but no one asked him about it until now. What does the fact that this Libya thing is getting attention currently, although overshadowed by the judge controversy, what does that say about the kind of scrutiny Trump's now facing and will face?
Well, not surprisingly, he's getting more scrutiny, as happens with every person who becomes the presumptive nominee of their party. The scrutiny level goes up, and it goes up in a way that most politicians do. Even if they think they've had a lot of scrutiny, they get a different level of scrutiny. It also is the case, I believe, that across our profession, people have looked back on the Republican nomination fight and concluded that not that somehow there was that the press enabled Trump and allowed him to become the Republican nominee, but that they looked at it and said, you know, we didn't get this quite exactly right. We got to get better at this. We got to figure out how to question him better, how to hold him to account with things he said in the past. This thing that Dickerson did and others have now started to do, of playing video for him. I think you're going to see that a lot. We're trying to learn our lessons and get better at our jobs collectively, I think.
You're going to see people from the Bush campaign, the Rubio campaign, the Cruz campaign, others say, oh, why didn't the press do a better job? Part of the answer is, yes, the press should have done a better job. Although with 17 candidates, you got to investigate everybody and do due diligence. But part of it is they did not have the kind of research operations and the kind of consistency and discipline to go after Trump on these things. I think that you're going to see more stuff about Hillary Clinton. We'll talk about that. For sure. You're going to see more stuff about Trump. And as is always the case, it's how you handle it. Much more than the underlying videotape, much more than the underlying inconsistencies. And the way he's handling this is the way he handles lots of things, is to simply deny the truth.
Yes, and that is a problem, a big problem. All right, coming up, Bernie Sanders' post-California primary calculations. Will he cash in his chips or go all the way until the convention? We'll try to read his not totally poker face after this quick break.
Tomorrow night, the media is going to declare Hillary Clinton the Democratic presumptive nominee. Bernie Sanders and what he does after that is the big question on the Democratic side of the presidential race. Today, Clinton pollster Joel Benenson went on MSNBC, and he basically called for Sanders to drop out of the race post-haste.
We're taking him at his word. Senator Sanders said that he wants to do everything possible to make sure Donald Trump doesn't become president. That's going to entail supporting the Democratic nominee of the party and doing it as early as you can and helping to energize and unify the party as early as we can. And that should happen as soon as it's clear that Hillary Clinton is the nominee of the party, and that'll happen tomorrow night.
Now, that was live television. It's possible Joel Benenson didn't mean to go that far, but that's as far as any Clinton staffer I've heard, and basically saying tomorrow night he should get out. The New York Times reported today that President Obama may well endorse Hillary Clinton this week. So where do you think Bernie Sanders' head is at? Is he going to get out, or is he going to fight on?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's more that people underestimate the possibility that Sanders will, within a few days of California and these other states that are voting tomorrow, drop out. People forget what it was like in 2008 when Hillary Clinton and a lot of people around Hillary Clinton, including Mark Penn, her chief strategist, and others said, we will fight on to Denver. We're going to try to flip the superdelegates. She came here to New York on the last night of the primary. She gave a speech. Terry McAuliffe said she was going to be the next president of the United States. The crowd chanted, saying, go on to Denver. She woke up the next day. She went to Washington, D.C., gave a speech, went to her campaign headquarters, and dropped out. The psychology of the candidate here is unpredictable, and the moment when it finally comes and you look at it cold, hard light of day, things can be really different than they've been for months.
Both because it's unpredictable and because the guy has earned the right to do what he has some space.
Of course he has.
Let's just wait and see what he does.
Right.
Let's not force him out, although a lot of our colleagues out on the trail have been doing that for days. There's a conference coming up of his supporters in Chicago in a couple weeks. There's still another primary after tomorrow in D.C. There's still a lot of issues he cares about. My hunch is that he's going to go with a middle ground. He's going to stop attacking her. He's going to say, let's go to the convention and see what happens. He wants to see what those superdelegates do. You know, the #1 book on Amazon right now is a book by a former Secret Service officer about the Clintons. I think Bernie Sanders, between the FBI investigation, the book, the moral authority he thinks he has because of his platform, because of the polls where he's doing better against Trump, I think he wants to see what happens and not just free up his delegates.
Here's what I do not think is going to happen. I do not think Bernie Sanders is going to spend the month and a half between now and Philadelphia beating her up, trying in some aggressive, harsh way to flip superdelegates. I think, you know, he's either going to kind of keep it alive in a tacit way, or he, as I say, he might just, you know, go back to Burlington as he's planning to do after Santa Monica tomorrow night. He might go back to Burlington, sit with his family, and say, you know what? I lost.
The big question is, I meant to look today on Google Maps. Is there, Clinton and Obama went to Unity, New Hampshire. I went to see if there's a Unity in some other battleground state, because that's the big thing. Does he appear with her or not?
All right, up next, the lessons we can learn from Donald Trump and the 2016 media landscape. We'll talk about that when we come back. Get ready for two bona fide media mavens. Joining us now from Washington is Alex Conant, the former communications director for Marco Rubio's presidential campaign. And here with us in Gotham City, New York Times media columnist Jim Rudenberg, whose piece today rebrands the Donald Trump campaign as, quote, Trump Productions, Inc. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Rudy, here's my question for you. The basic thesis of your column was basically Trump floods the zone. It's all about volume, not about quality, particularly what he says. He just talks, and that has worked for him. Seems like maybe the evidence the past few days could give the lie to that thesis. Please respond.
I think that was the argument at the top of the column, and then the column twisted around toward the bottom to say, here comes a general election. Will it continue?
I think I got a little bored about halfway through. I might have stopped.
Come on.
Kidding. So you think it's going to change? Why? Is this an example then of what you're saying, that the different environment is going to make it harder for him to continue with that strategy?
Well, he's definitely, first of all, today was new Trumpian content via Bloomberg News. I don't know if that was the content that he wanted out, but I don't know. There's a lot more scrutiny now. The stakes are higher, and as someone supporting the Clinton campaign told me, now it's, can he be a president? Is he just, or, it's not just some compelling personality. That said, I will plead the fifth that I don't know whether this will continue to work because we're talking about him still. Does that hurt Hillary Clinton? Maybe not when this is the kind of content you're talking about. So quality may matter a lot more now.
Alex, rarely have I seen someone come out of a losing campaign and learn a big lesson so quickly and put it into effect. You and two of your former colleagues from the campaign, I think, have learned one of the huge lessons, which is from the Trump campaign, which is you need to be present. You can't be out of the discussion. My question is, doesn't quality matter too? Trump's content has a lot of appeal. It's not just a lot. It's stuff that the media and the public's generally interested in.
Right. I mean, so you're right. Terry Sullivan, Will Hawley, and I, all three senior staffers on Marco Rubio's campaign, we're starting a new firm called Firehouse Strategies. And we're starting it on the premise that the way people receive information now is really different than it was just 4 or 5 years ago. I've worked in every presidential campaign for the last decade. This one was totally different, in part because of how people received information. And that means that candidates, campaigns, organizations need to deliver information differently. And mostly they need to deliver more information. And you're right, it has to be high quality information because otherwise people aren't going to click it, they're not going to share it. But Trump, to his credit, produced a ton of content during the campaign. I shared with Jim during his reporting of this story, we measured on a daily basis the information flow coming from all the campaigns to our targeted universe. And there really wasn't a single day in the campaign where Trump wasn't lapping the field in terms of providing information to our targeted universe in the first 4 states.
By a factor of what on his best days?
On his best day, he would get twice as much as the rest of the field combined, if not more. I mean, sometimes, sometimes when he was really making news, be it after a major news event or something, he was, the only one that anyone was hearing from. But on average, he was getting twice as much attention as the rest of the field combined.
Well. Alex, I want to ask you guys both this question. I'm going to stay with you, Alex, just for real quick. Like, we were just talking a little while ago about the fact that Trump seems to be getting slightly different kind of coverage now than he got during the nomination fight, being called on his inconsistencies on the Libya issue, for example. Do you think, Alex, that the media failed in terms of how it covered Trump in the context of the nomination contest?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, the media failed to vet him in a serious way last summer in the same way that they vetted my boss, for instance. The New York Times last summer, some of Rutenberg's colleagues there did a big story about Marcos, how Marcos spent his personal money. We've never seen that sort of reporting on Donald Trump until recently. But I will say, in the media's defense, nobody took him seriously last summer. I think he had 16 or 17 competitors in the Republican race, and none of us took him seriously. I don't think voters took him seriously. We treated him as a businessman and a celebrity. Now, however, the media, his competitors, and voters are starting to look at him as a potential president. That is a very different environment for him, and I think it's reflected in the coverage and how voters are treating him in the last week or two.
Do you see a qualitative difference in terms of how the press is covering Trump? And if you do see that difference, what do you think explains the change?
I do see that difference. Obviously, we've had a lot of really tough coverage of him over the last few days. And I'd say it's general election time, and it's lessons learned. I think that collectively, the news media and my colleagues out there think, we should have probably treated him the same way we treated a Marco Rubio, or, for that matter, people complain in the kind of Republican side that Hillary hasn't been vetted, but she's had her share of tougher stories. And there was a time when we were writing about email servers, and we were treating Trump more like a, celebrity reality kind of candidate. That said, things have been very tough. Now the quandary is, it looks like a war between Trump and the press, and that's a whole new problem I don't know how reporters are going to handle that, because they're being drawn into a fight, quite the opposite.
Trump has a good sense of poetry, so of course he wanted to comment for your story. What is his view of your thesis?
What I asked him was, is his theory of the case that as long as we're talking about Donald Trump, he's winning, which has been sort of my assumption. He denies that. He says he'll take all the good publicity in the world. He doesn't want any bad. Therefore, you know, on the veterans donation story last week, where he was criticized about how much did he really give and when did he give it, he said that should be 100% good press. But that said, he says he doesn't want controversial stories. I don't know if he's going to share with me his innermost thoughts about his theory of the case.
Alex, let me probe your business model a little bit, right? Following on what I asked you before, which is, it's all well and good if I'm running for a Senate in Oklahoma and I hire you and I say, I want to dominate the media the way Trump does, and I'm not that interesting. Can you, as consultants, get somebody the kind of volume of coverage that Trump gets, or is it really more based on Trump as a one-man band than anybody he could hire?
Well, I think Trump is unique in his ability to command media attention. But I think for any candidate at any level, if you want to get your message out, you need to provide a lot of content in hopes of reaching people, in part because what people are talking about today is not what they're going to be talking about 48 hours from now. The information moves so fast. And then I would also say, if you have a problem like the Clinton campaign had with the IG report the other week, you need to aggressively tackle the problem. You can't just hope that it goes away on its own, because in the information vacuum, if you don't fill it, your opponents and your critics will.
Alex, what do you think about what Trump has said about Judge Curiel?
I think there's no place for that in modern political discourse. I think every Republican should condemn it.
Should Marco Rubio withdraw his endorsement of Trump over it?
Well, look, I'm not going to get between. I no longer advise Marco Rubio. I know today he gave an interview where he was highly critical of Trump's statements on that. I hope Trump repudiates those statements. It is bad for his candidacy. It is bad for his party, and it's bad for the country for a major nominee of a party to say things like that.
All right, Alex Conant, Jim Rutenberg. Oh. Thank you for joining us. Both of you, you're great. Next up, remembering the greatest, Muhammad Ali. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can also listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
There are legends, and then there are those who are in a class by themselves, like Muhammad Ali, the three-time world heavyweight champion and political provocateur, died late Friday night at the age of 74. Here to talk to us about the greatest of all time, as the guy's pretty great himself. Robert Lipsyte, who's the esteemed sports journalist who wrote the obituaries about Ali in both the New York Times and a special commemorative edition of Time magazine. Bob, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I want to start with the story you start your piece with, which is one of the great moments probably in your career, looking back at least, which is the day you were there when the Beatles met Muhammad Ali.
I wish I had been more attuned to history or could look ahead and have appreciated it more. I just remember that these guys were kind of in the way, and I had to interview this fighter. I'd been sent down. I got the assignment to cover the first Liston Clay fight. In Miami in 1964, because the real reporter didn't think it was worth his time. Clay was going to get knocked out in the first round. Liston was unbeatable. And I was told, as soon as I get Miami, rent a car, drive back and forth between the arena and the closest hospital so that I would waste no deadline time following Cassius Clay into intensive care. So that was kind of what was in my mind. I went to the gym where he was working out. He had not arrived yet. And right behind me were these four funny little guys with British accents and messy hair. Like around my age, they were wearing matching white Cabana jackets. And we were all pushed into a dressing room to wait. Okay, what had happened, which I didn't know right away, was they were on their first American visit. They had gone for a photo op with Sonny Liston. Liston took one look at them and said, "I ain't posing with them sissies." And so they were stuffed back in a limo, I guess the last time you stuffed the Beatles anywhere, and they drove to Clay's camp for a second photo op.
When they finally meet him, what happens?
The five of us gasp. We had never seen such a beautiful creature in our lives. And he said, "Come on, Beatles, let's make some money." And they went into the ring, and this is on YouTube now, and as if they had choreographed it. The Beatles stood in a row. He tapped the first one. They went down like dominoes. Then they formed a pyramid, to try to hit him. And it pretty much was over.
So I put on a show, the Beatles leave, and what does Ali say to you?
He says to me, "Who were those little sissies?" So I don't feel so bad about not knowing who the Beatles were either.
I want to ask you a question about politics, because this is basically a political show. And Ali, in addition to his athletics, was obviously a huge political figure in the 60s. You think about him joining the Nation of Islam, changing his name, and then refusing to be inducted in the armed forces. How, just in the context of that time, how much of a political earthquake did those series of things cause?
They were enormously important politically and socially and religiously. And I think that what gets forgotten so quickly was here is this emotionally stunted, insecure, 22-year-old kid, but younger, out of an abusive home, who goes to the Nation of Islam for some sort of security and father figure. And suddenly, he's caught in the turbulence of one of the most politically charged time in my life. And he's against civil rights. He's turned his back on the main religion of America. Right. He's cast off his slave name before, Roots came out and we really knew what that meant. And he is suddenly representing millions of people and is a polarizing figure. And I don't think that he entirely knew what he was talking about at that time.
How much do you think that it had an effect on just, it seems to me it was a hugely important moment for the merger of politics and sports.
Yes.
That suddenly you had athletes who saw themselves as needing to or wanting to or being legitimate for them to take these kinds of important stands on important political and social issues.
Yeah,
but very ripple effect.
But very few came even close. I mean, later on, Jim Brown, the football player, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos at the '68 Olympics, partially in protest to Ali losing his title.
Billie Jean King.
Billie Jean King, excellent, yes. But not to the extent that he seems to have done that. You know, my feeling is that he became a political symbol because there was an innocence and blank slate about him. So it was easy for everybody to put their banner, their bumper sticker, their magnet on Muhammad Ali. And he was really in the process of changing. I don't believe he really fully understood what he was talking about until he was forced to stop boxing, spent 3.5 years going to college campuses, which was the only way he could make any money. And in the give and take with students, he began, he figured out where. Here's a good example. So I just happened to have been there. 1966, the Senate hearings on the war. Maxwell Taylor calls a senator a traitor because he's not behind the same day, Ali finds out he's been reclassified 1A, right? The first thing he said, the moment he heard this from an AP reporter, he said, "Why me? I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. I pay all these taxes. I buy all these bombs and airplanes and helmets for soldiers. Why don't they draft poor boys from Louisville?" Now, at the end of that day, harassed and crazy, he would say, because somebody, the 100th person says, "How do you feel about going to Vietnam next week and having to kill Viet Cong?" I got nothing against them Viet Cong. Whoa. But, in the arc of that day, he put a white paper out? I don't think so.
Right. Bob, thank you. Incredible story, incredible man. Coming up, we'll talk more about Donald Trump and whether the size of his campaign matters right after this.
We are joined now by one of our favorite people in the entire universe, NBC News correspondent Katie Tur, who's outside of Trump Tower. She has a story up today about how Trump's bare-bones staff and campaign infighting could be hurting his run for the presidency. Katie, thanks for coming on the show. We gather that you have had some pushback maybe from Trump world regarding our Bloomberg Politics story about that conference call today. Tell us about that.
We got a little bit of pushback about that reporting, and this was just given to us by Corey Lewandowski. He told this to Hallie Jackson, my colleague, that there's no racism tied to this whatsoever. You had a judge who refuses to dismiss this case, which should have been dismissed on summary judgment. He's also pushing back on the accuracy of the report, saying he's not going to go into detail about a private phone call that took place, but that he gave the individuals on the call the understanding and the background of the case, and that, again, it should have been dismissed on summary judgment. So they're pushing back on it, but they're not saying exactly what they believe was inaccurate about Bloomberg's pretty sizable report.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's not a whole lot of, there's not, in that pushback, doesn't seem like there's any particular thing they're pushing back on with any real counter evidence there. It seems kind of more like a generic, we don't really like this story kind of pushback.
And that's the same thing that I got from my story that came out today. It was a generalized, you don't know what you're talking about because you have no access, because we don't like you, so we don't give you access, which is kind of the problem with the campaign encapsulated in just one tweet. The campaign doesn't see giving reporters access to what's going on behind the scenes or how they're planning as beneficial to them. And so in light of that, they don't have a communications staff that's robust. They have about 2 people working on communications, Hope Hicks, who answers hundreds of emails and every single day, if not thousands, and then Corey Lewandowski, who directs some of the responses to the reporters he chooses to respond to. And that is problematic because they're not getting their message out unless Donald Trump is tweeting about something. And it's also problematic, you guys, as we've been talking about for the past couple weeks, is that Donald Trump doesn't have the ability to get to spin things to his advantage the way that the Hillary Clinton machine does. When Donald Trump comes out with a foreign policy speech, or when he comes out with a tweet or a controversial statement, or if he says something on the trail or on one of the shows, Hillary Clinton's team comes in and they say, look what Donald Trump said, here is why it's wrong, or here is why it's outrageous. And they can do this with all of Donald Trump's past statements as well. When Hillary Clinton has a foreign policy speech, Donald Trump does not have the ability to counter that with the same full court press that she does, because they do not have the team in place. The RNC is trying this, and they're working with the campaign, and they're pushing out their own rapid response talking points. But the reality is, and I've spoken to a number of sources who say this, the RNC's priorities and the Trump campaign's priorities are very different. So while they may respond pretty quickly to Hillary Clinton's foreign policy speech, they're not necessarily going to respond to the Trump University case, which was a big story last week, quite controversial, and the story that keeps on going with Donald Trump continuing to call out this judge and adamantly saying that he does not believe calling his Mexican heritage into question, even though he was born in Indiana and is an American citizen. He's refusing to acknowledge that that is racist, even though he's been accused of that by a number of people now.
Katie, I was struck by 2 pieces of data along the way here in this narrative we're talking about. First, that over the weekend, from Hillary Clinton's Thursday attack through the weekend and the controversy over Trump's judge comments, almost no one has come to his defense. You know, lots of criticism, but almost no defense. And then Trump, on this call that our Bloomberg colleagues reported on today, sounding just like the Clintons often do when they're being attacked in the press and by the opposition, saying, basically, where are my people? Who's defending me? I've never known Trump to really feel like he needed people to defend him. This seems to me to be kind of a new phenomenon, saying, I need surrogates.
You know, I've never heard him say this either, and it's interesting to see if these surrogates actually come out and do defend him in that way, and do come out and say, we believe that Donald Trump is right to call out this judge for his Mexican heritage, somehow not being able to be unbiased towards Donald Trump. And if they do take it a step further and actually call the reporters who are questioning it racist themselves, if that happens, then Donald Trump has a surrogate operation that will go out and deliver his message. So far, we haven't seen that, and NBC News has been trying over and over again today to get anybody to come on the record to defend these comments, and so far, we have run out of luck.
I'll buy an eggnog on the corner there from that cart for every surrogate who comes out and follows Trump's orders. Everyone. Eggnogs all around.
Where is there eggnog?
For you and
what
the
are
crew.
You talking about?
Mark's hallucinating. Don't worry about it. Katie Tur, you're awesome. Mark, you're hallucinating, and eggnog. All right, coming up, Republicans have a new proposal to overturn Dodd-Frank. We will tell you all about it right after this.
Our man Kevin Cirilli has an exclusive up on BloombergPolitics.com now. An interview with the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Jeb Hensarling. He unveiled a new proposal to overturn Dodd-Frank today. Here's some of what Hensarling said when he's asked whether he's talked to Donald Trump about the overhaul.
Listen, there's a lot of things Donald Trump has said and done that I don't agree with. But something I do agree with is that Dodd-Frank has failed, and it has failed miserably, and that it has to be replaced, and we need to promote economic growth. So I know he's interested in doing that. My crystal ball is fuzzy on who's going to be our next president. But if it's Donald Trump, I hope to be able to work with him and actually see Dodd-Frank replaced and replaced with the Financial Choice Act.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. President Obama plans to formally endorse Hillary Clinton as early as this week. That's according to a person familiar with the president's plans. The timing of the endorsement has not been set yet, but the president is speaking at a Democratic fundraiser Wednesday here in New York City. A Democratic congressman from Texas has written an open letter to Donald Trump calling him a racist and telling him where to place his proposed border wall. Philemon Vela represents a district along the U.S.-Mexico border. He also called Trump's attacks on the Mexican-American federal judge in the Trump University lawsuit, quote, just plain despicable. The Chinese vice premier met with U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman today. It's the 8th round of the U.S.-China economic and strategic dialogue. They're working on topics such as how to advance both countries' economic openness. This is day one of the annual two-day summit in Beijing. Spain's Olympic Committee says 3,000 bottles of insect repellent will be available to its athletes to help avoid the Zika virus during the Rio Olympics. The committee says it reached a deal with Omega Pharma to provide its strongest repellent to the hundreds of Spanish athletes. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by our 2,400 journalists and more than 150 news bureaus around the world. From New York, I'm Mark Crumpton. Bloomberg West is next.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, Line wants to make its mark. The Japanese messaging app could deliver the biggest tech IPO of the year. Details up ahead. Plus, clinching the nomination competition. Hillary Clinton is just 28 delegates shy of hitting the magic number, but there are signs California may be feeling the burn. Who's the preferred candidate in Silicon Valley? And looking beyond driverless cars, some of Google's most promising moonshots are being hatched in its life sciences unit. We'll discuss the biggest breakthroughs coming in biotech out of Verily. But first, to our lead. Just when you thought the tech IPO pipeline was dried up, the Japanese messaging app Line is aiming for what could be the biggest tech exit of the year, targeting a valuation of between $5 and $6 billion. And the on-demand meal kit startup Blue Apron is said to be taking its first steps towards a potential IPO. Remember, no business has raised more than $150 million in a tech IPO so far this year, even though more than 160 private companies are currently valued at $1 billion or more. Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick is our guest host for the hour, and our Bloomberg News IPO reporter Alex Barinka joins us now with more. So first of all, Alex, let's talk about Line, because they originally filed a couple of years ago in Tokyo at a potential $9 billion valuation. Why now, and why this valuation?
So back then, you'll recall that IPO didn't go through. Now they're coming at it again, and they're taking a different approach. Right now, they're looking to dual list, according to our sources, both in Tokyo and in New York, in the U.S. And they're looking to raise $1 to $2 billion, about half of that from U.S. investors. So they're coming to market now. They've seen some slowdown in their business, which you can see in the read-through in that change in valuation. But it seems like they are now ready to kind of take those steps, be a public company, and obviously get the capital that would come from this kind of listing. The company has talked about expanding, outside into new markets like Indonesia. Majority of its business now comes from outside of its native Japan. So they have some growth prospects that they're eyeing here that this capital could potentially help them achieve.
That's interesting, Alex, because as I understand it, they have about 200 million monthly active users, but user growth has really stalled over the last few quarters, even though they say that they're profitable.
Right. They say they're profitable. User growth has stalled. You do still see revenue growing at 40% last year from the year before that. But a couple numbers I will point out to you. Line makes about $5.10 a user. When you're looking at what U.S. investors will be comparing the company to, you look to a Twitter, who makes $7.27 a user. You look to a Facebook, who makes $11.27 a user. So you see that they're not quite making as much on the users, which, as you say, growth has stalled. That would be kind of one of the pain points here for Line. They have talked about the fact that ad sales only makes up about 1/3 of their revenue, and so they're looking to potentially push that out and make up more. Like Facebook and Twitter, it's upwards of a majority of the revenue for those two companies. So that could potentially be where they're looking to grow dollars, even if that user growth has stalled.
The revenue is more diversified when you look at where it comes from. 35% from advertising. Some of it also comes from content and games. Also, digital stickers, I believe, provide something like 20% plus revenue. David, do you think Line will be an IPO that other companies will watch, or is this too unique a case?
Well, I think they are a unique company, and even though it's tempting to compare them to WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or a few other, WeChat perhaps, they actually pioneered many of the techniques that these other companies are currently using, particularly stickers, for example. They're really more like a media company and a content company. And one of the interesting things about the ads they do sell is they generally forswear targeting of the type that has sort of made Facebook into what it is. They try to be kind of more the ally of the user, and they're getting a lot of their revenue from celebrities and brands who they give access to their users, who basically allows the brands to sort of message them as if it was a friend. And it's kind of a powerful model. I think that in Japan, they are an amazing brand with unbelievable strength as a company. I think it's going to be a growing company that probably is a decent company for the long run. And I don't think it's crazy that they're going public. Whether it'll portend other IPOs, I don't know.
And interesting, Alex, you've also got some news about Blue Apron, that they're having preliminary talks about their exit strategy. What did you find out?
So my colleague and I reported today Blue Apron has held talks with bankers to discuss potential plans, the possibility of going public in the next 12 months. An IPO would mean a valuation of around $3 billion publicly. You'll remember they raised money last year at a $2 billion valuation. But what this really communicates to me within this, dearth of tech IPOs that we've talked about, Emily, is some of these companies that are further along, remember Blue Apron is profitable according to our sources, are starting to look to that IPO exit route as something that they would consider, which we've seen a lot of the larger, as we call them, unicorns, really tap the brakes when it comes to considering going public. So good news for my market and covering IPOs, but maybe with Blue Apron, we saw Twilio file 2 weeks ago. There's some activity starting to happen in what's been a really, really slow year for tech IPOs.
All right, Alex Barinka, our Bloomberg News IPO reporter, thanks so much. David Kirkpatrick, Techonomy CEO, our Bloomberg contributing editor, and my guest host, you're sticking with me. Now to a story we are watching. Troy Carter, the CEO of Atom Factory, has been hired by Spotify to help land exclusive deals with artists, as well as to create new content. You may know Carter as the manager of the stars like Lady Gaga or John Legend, or as an investor in companies like Uber, Dropbox, and Warby Parker. I sat down with Carter back in May and asked him about Spotify. Take a listen.
There have been times where I had to get on the phone with really big managers and who have really big clients and tell them what the downside was for them leaving their product off of Spotify. All of the music is still available on YouTube for free. It's still available on the piracy services for free. So you're missing out on a big audience, and you're missing out on a revenue stream. And by the way, you're ignoring the future.
That was actually from my interview with Troy Carter on Studio 1.0 towards the end of last year. Now, coming up, it is decision time for California in what could be a make or break vote for Bernie Sanders. We will focus on where Silicon Valley's allegiance lies in the race for U.S. president next. Now to a story we've been following. Swiss voters have soundly rejected a plan for universal basic income, or a guaranteed monthly payment from the government for all citizens. Under the proposal, every adult citizen would have received a monthly check for 2,500 Swiss francs. It was rejected by 77% of the electorate. The theory of universal basic income is a form of social security in which all citizens get a monthly payment whether or not they work. Switzerland is the first country to vote on universal basic income. Here in the U.S., Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders says he's sympathetic to the theory, but stops well short of advocating it. And speaking of U.S. politics, Hillary Clinton is just 28 delegates short of the 2,383 needed to be the Democratic presidential nominee. This ahead of Tuesday's primaries in New Jersey and California. Here in Silicon Valley, Bernie Sanders is actually the favorite, raising more than double that of Secretary Clinton. Donald Trump follows in third. Joining me now to help break down tech's stance on Tuesday's important primary, Steve Hilton, the CEO of CrowdPack, a political data technology company. And still with me, our guest host for the hour, David Kirkpatrick in New York. So, Steve, Bernie Sanders, by far the favorite in Silicon Valley. I found that kind of surprising.
He's doing really well with people who work in the tech sector. So this isn't the big bosses. This is software engineers and product managers, all the people who build the companies that we all use, the Googles and the Apples and so on. And
why do you think that is?
Well, I think that when you look at the profile of people who work in tech, they are very liberal. At CrowdPack, one of the things we do is give an ideological score to candidates and donors based on the patterns of their giving. And actually, if you look at the average political leanings of those who work at Google or Apple or these companies, they are roughly in line with Bernie Sanders. They're much more to the left than Hillary Clinton.
Would you say that this California primary is make or break for Sanders, but it's not for Hillary Clinton?
Well, look, the thing is that